Hello there, I'm Jonathan, and you're most likely not. This is innerVIVID, Theme 7, Episode 2, and you should write all that down. We're still coming to you from the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people, lands never ceded. Theme 7 is called More Than Just Us, and we're wondering about higher powers and whether that's an idea we're down with. In this terrain, one of the things on my mind is this. How do people believe things? Or how do they come to believe them? What's the process? What's the process in hearing an idea or thing, then deciding it's true, then deciding you can adopt it and live your life so that thing might alter how you live? How does that happen? First off though, is it easier believing this stuff when?
Is it easier to believe in a higher power when you're young?
I don't know. I think it's easy to believe in a higher power all the time. So I guess when I was young, I started to have a belief.
It was easy because I have people surround me to support. But if you don't have the background, yes, you're looking for something, but you don't know what you're looking for. So it would be harder for someone who doesn't have the support. That's what I believe. Yeah.
I was not raised in a religious household, so I didn't have much of a concept of a higher power or religion until I was about 20-something.
Oh, but I did go to church every week because my mum did. And maybe that helped.
In this video, we'll get a window into this process, I think. Young or old, or the awkward years in between. Here's the very helpful question, because I helped come up with it.
If you believe in a higher power, what led you to that?
I think discovering the sense of the divine. One of my most powerful memories of this was when I was sitting on the train and looking out the window. And I started to cry because I had this sense of something out there that was way bigger than me. And that's really helped support my working through understanding what that divine might be. So that's what it feels like to me.
When I was 4, my mother used to send us over to the local Sunday school for a bit of free babysitting. Now, my mum didn't participate in faith. And we were in Innisfail in far north Queensland, so we could just wander off ourselves, my brother and me. And so I heard a lot of God stories. But neither of my parents talked about God or believed in God, actually. And I remember I was sitting on the front steps of my old Queenslander in Innisfail where we lived, and I was sitting with my dog, Smokey. And this idea just popped into my head. And I thought, if God's real and I'm not talking to God, then that's really mean. And that's where it began. And that sense of curiosity and being engaged with or just wondering about, and I might even say today being called to or drawn to what I think of as God, has never left me.
Okay, Anne brings up a theme here that we'll see more of. Look for the shared ideas with the next few people. It's pretty obvious.
My parents. I think a lot of us probably have that same kind of my parents-ish kind of response.
I am a child of the church. I got told this is God, this is Jesus, this is what we believe. So until the age of 11, I'd repeat those words. This is God, this is Jesus, this is what I believe.
I was dragged along, sometimes kicking, sometimes screaming, sometimes as a grumpy adolescent to a Christian community.
But eventually you have to make your own choice about it. And so for me that was, the God actually that I believe in is slightly different from the one that my parents gave me. It's certainly much more accepting. And I'm led to that belief of God through seeing lots of different people's experiences in life including my own, and accepting them. If I can accept them, and I'm a human who loves terribly, I can only imagine that a being that is full of perfect love would accept their stories and my stories and all my crappiness and all everybody else's crappiness and all of our wonderful amazingness with the same, not with the same love that I do, obviously with an enormous amount of love that I could never imagine, actually. So that's what I believe in.
And then as a teenager, I lost contact with God. That's not God's fault, that's mine. And I probably didn't find God, relocate God, and probably until about my mid-30s. And then when I look back, I believe God was always talking to me. It was just I was choosing not to listen. And it was a very stressful time in my life, a marriage breakup, where I was looking for reason. And my late mother, God bless her, she said, come to church. And I went, oh, really? She said, come on, come to church. I went, oh, I think I'm busy. What time is it? Yeah, busy. But eventually, after a few weeks, I gave in and, I thought in my mid-30s that I didn't have to do what my mother said anymore, and I was wrong. And she dragged me to church. That first day I was there, I felt God's love. I just felt the warmth there. And to be honest, I felt a place that I could grieve for my marriage in safety. I just felt like someone was holding me that whole time. So from there, I followed a journey, and that will be a journey that I'll follow to the day I die.
But I came to a point in my life where I rejected it all because I looked at my parents, I looked at the community that I was part of, and all I saw was hypocrisy. In my late teens, I had an opportunity to be in a space with other teenagers and young adults where I had an opportunity to really think to myself, what is it that I want to believe and what is it that I do believe? I really had been wrestling with, is there actually something more than just an earthly life where we are walking for a number of years and then there's nothing else? And it was really being around my own age group, hearing other perspectives, and then asking myself deep within, is there something more? And the only answer I could come up with is, yes, there is something more. And that's how I came to believe, not because my parents forced me to, not because I was dragged kicking and screaming, just because I made that personal decision that, yes, there is something that I wanted to explore, I wanted to search for, that I call God.
My mum and dad, in the first instance, led me to any sense of God. They took me to church from the day I was born, I think. So my earliest memories certainly include going to church and not just seeing the ritual, but listening to the stories. And that introduced me to this idea of something bigger than us, something beyond us, that cares about us. So that was the childhood kernel of faith. And as I have gone on in life, I've remained really curious about that. I've wanted to understand more, to understand my experiences of a loving companion in life. So even when things have been pretty awful, and sometimes they have, you don't get to be my age without having gone through some tough experiences. I have always had a sense of not being alone in those experiences, of there being this force of love that has accompanied me even into the darkness, and been there with me and been steadfast and reliable. Not about judgment and morality, and a God who scolds us for getting it wrong or tripping over our own humanity, but a God who knows all of that about us already and just says that that's why I love you, because that's how you are, and that's what I yearn for, and that's enough.
I grew up in a Christian household. I went to a school where there was a school chaplain. I went to a university where the college had a college chaplain. Christianity had a pretty good go at getting me before it got me. And if I had been born somewhere else, I'd have probably been some other kind of expression of faith. But I'm really grateful for the fact that I had those experiences, because I think it has helped me be a broader human being than I would have been otherwise. But I think at certain points in my life, I've taken those opportunities and I've interrogated them, and I've inquired of what they mean. I've asked questions. I've found people to go and talk to. And that is kind of why I've kind of made that journey.
So I was raised in a Christian home and culture. And that home and culture led me to believe in God in a pretty traditional sense. And the thing about that notion of God is that it's designed to kind of mirror and support also a particular notion of the self, of what the self is. So the self as unified, the self as transparent to itself, the self as in control of itself, the self as kind of fully stitched up. That conception of self has its kind of basis and mirror in a conception of God as the same thing, except on a kind of, higher level. So it was really the kind of progressive discovery, which was both wonderful and traumatizing, that I am in fact none of those things, that undid that conception of God for me and led me into a different conception of the divine or of God. That I don't coincide with myself. I'm a contradictory person, like everybody. And that I had to discover that really like the best things in life, creativity, sexuality, generosity, good relationships, they come by way of embracing the fact that we don't coincide with ourselves. And that those things are actually opened onto when we can kind of not demand this unified, perfect, coincident self. That actually the fact that all of us are multiple and divided against ourselves is part of what makes us human. It's actually essentially what makes us human. So I think it was learning to embrace myself as not unified, not stitched up, that led me into a more complex notion of divinity or God, which I'm still working out.
Thanks, Peter. I love the way that guy thinks. All right, so I'm definitely aware, because of the people we've been interviewing, that there's a lot of shared experience on this question. I mean, there are differences, but you know what I mean? So then the next story is a different one, and it's good to shake things up a bit.
My life had been up and down. I left my parents at the age of 11. And so I had to cross the desert from Sudan, it was Sudan then, to Ethiopia. And so that was a very long walk across a dry and very dangerous desert. And so while we're crossing the desert to Ethiopia, running away from war, a lot of friends did not make it to the end for a number of reasons. Some gave up because it was a long distance travel. Some got sick and they just died on the scene. Some were very thirsty, and because of thirst, they died of thirst. Some died because of hunger. Some of them were eaten by the wild animals in the desert. And so I did not know God back then. Then arriving to the border between Sudan and Ethiopia was a long river. So we had to cross the river, swimming, end up drowning in the river. And so it happened when we came back from Ethiopia again to the border, then we followed the border, the Sudan-Ethiopia border, heading off to Kenya. It was a long and a terrible walk, almost 7 or 9 months. The same thing happened. A lot of my friends, cousins died while we were walking to Kenya. And so arriving in Kenya in 1992, this is where I began to go to the church. And so I fall in love with God, and then I became Christian. And all the present time, I always reflect, okay, on this journey, I was this old, and then some of my friends who were older than me died. Why? Why them and not me? Who kept me alive? Who saved me? I was very thirsty, and who sustained me until I get to next day? And so reflecting on my own lives and all that I've gone through make me come to the conclusion that there is God, and that God is a loving God, and that God is a powerful God, a God who can bring me out of chaos. And then I read the story of Israelite moving from Egypt into the Promised Land, and I just compare it to my own life, and it's almost the same. God gave them the manna in the wilderness, but God gave me a friend to give me food. God asked Moses to strike the mountain so that they have water. Sometimes someone come from nowhere and give me the water. So God helped me. So that's why I believe in God, and this is what kept me coming closer to God. And even to the present time, if things goes wrong with me, if life is treating me harshly, I always have hope that God is within this. And that is what brings me out of all these problems most of the time if I fall in one.
What led me to it? Really life experience. I had what I would now call religious experiences when I was really quite a small child, 3, 4, 5, particularly at the beach. Felt really connected to everything, and I sort of thought that was just how life was. I thought that's who we were. I had no religious backgrounds, I had no terminology for any of that. And it was only when I became a teenager and started talking to my friends about that sort of stuff, I realised that this was something special, and they had similar experiences, but we all had different ones. So there was a sense in which there was a commonality, and the thing we became aware of as teenagers was it wasn't actually part of the public discourse. There was no talk about religious experiences or feeling connected. It was all very utilitarian, very dry, if you like. And so for me, it was that sense of being connected that I experienced in nature, and I only gave it a sort of religious sort of feeling when I encountered a group of people in a small church in Sydney, and they were awestruck. And I thought, oh, I understand that experience. And so then I just began to ask questions about what that might look like. I got the same buzz out of science. I remember one time I was learning the Krebs cycle, which is to do with photosynthesis and cell energy processes, and I remember just standing back from it one day because I was sort of getting bogged down, and I thought, wow, this process is going at 1,000 kilometres an hour in the little thing that's this big, and if it didn't go perfectly, the cell would stop. And yet here it is, and I just sort of got myself awestruck and fascinated and thought, isn't this world just something amazing?
Okay, parental influence, experience, making up our minds for ourselves, science, extremely challenging life circumstances, even religious experiences. There's a lot of possibilities here. All of the I grew up in a religious household stuff reminds me that the kind of people we've been interviewing are people who feel positive about spirituality. I mention that because there's a proportion of people who grew up in religious homes, and it might have had the opposite effect, kind of leaving some of those people with a pretty negative impression of spirituality. That's definitely true for some people. But if you never had any of that exposure, in that situation, is it possible to get on board with this stuff? Because maybe that's where you sit. Gillian has some excellent words. Have a listen.
I think that as humans, we have an innate ability to recognise a spiritual dimension to life. But we may or may not have words to describe that. Because like everything, words are given to us by our community. the language philosopher Wittgenstein talks about how we only have words for things that our community has experience of and gives to us. So I often think that we all have encountered God, that God is reaching out to every single one of us in the greatest of love. And sometimes that looks like that moment of absolute stillness and peace somewhere. Maybe, sitting on the veranda at sunset and just experiencing a sense of deep contentment and joy. I might say that's, my heart and God's heart touching, but somebody else would just say that's me being in tune with the universe, or me finding peace or stillness or being mindful. They're all just words, grasping at a common experience. And I'm not here to tell somebody that their words aren't good enough. If their words are helpful for them, then use those words. It's not about getting the words right. It's about having words that work for you to help you name your experience in a way that is life-giving and encouraging and loving.
I really like that. I know I get a sense of that love or connection or awe, something bigger than me sometimes. When a baby grabs your finger for the first time, or when the waves are crashing on the beach at dawn, when you sing your team song after a big game, when you're dancing in the mosh pit to your fave music with a huge sweaty crowd. Moments of awe, love, connection and joy. Could these be pointers to the existence of something bigger than us? For me, the answer to that is yes. What do you think?